With the recent news of Hollow Knight Silksong being delayed, I thought now would be a good time to look back and appreciate the true beauty that is Hollow Knight. This video will showcase my journey through Hollow Knight as I try to capture as much of the game's greatness as possible. Hollow Knight, in my opinion, has completely redefined the Metroidvania genre by itself, as there is just so much packed into one game here that make it rise above any other game in this category. I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking here, as the common opinion of Hollow Knight seems to be extremely positive, but I wish to capture the beauty of Hollow Knight one more time in this video. If you've never played Hollow Knight before, I heavily recommend checking it out, even if you're not a fan of Metroidvania type games, as I certainly was not before playing this game. I would like to start off the video talking about the gameplay mechanics of Hollow Knight, as this is one of the many points in the game that make it so great. At the start of the game, you are very limited in the actions you can take. All you can do is swing your nail, jump, move left and right, and heal yourself using souls harvested when attacking enemies. This limits your actions as you explore Hollow Nest in the early game because many places are inaccessible without obtaining more movement options. However, this does not mean that the early game is bare bones. There are plenty of places to explore before you even gain more abilities such as a double jump or dashing. The combat mechanics in this game are fairly simple as well. As I mentioned earlier, all you can do is swing your nail at enemies, but this changes later on as you can expend your soul gauge to cast a large variety of spells that each work well in certain situations. Each spell and ability you find have upgrades that make them much more powerful, which makes looking for these upgrades feel extremely satisfying to find and use. The combat feels easy to learn and hard to master, as there is so much you can do in fights with the small number of options you are given. The death mechanic in this game will be very familiar to anyone that has played any games in the Dark Souls category, as if you die, you lose all your money, and the only way to get it back is to destroy your shade that is left in the same area where you died. You can only use 2/3 of your soul gauge before you reclaim your shade, so it is extremely important to always go back to where you died and get your money back. The more you explore different areas, the more abilities you can pick up to make traveling easier and give you access to different locations. Another interesting mechanic is through the use of charms. There are a total of 40 charms in the game, each one having a different effect on your character, and you can customize any charms you find when you sit at a bench. These charms can do a wide variety of things, including giving you more attack range and speed, changing some of your spells, and giving you some defensive options. I'd recommend mixing and matching all different kinds of charms to fit your own playstyle. Next, I'd like to talk about exploring all the various areas throughout Hollow Knight. When you start a new game, you are put onto the Howling Cliffs, a barren area that is mostly meant for you to get an understanding of the controls. However, if you do some exploring here, you may find a couple of secrets hidden within. After the Howling Cliffs, you are met with Dirtmouth, a town that only has one resident, and this serves as the spot where you often come back to get some upgrades every once in a while. One of the coolest parts about this game is that you are free to explore wherever you want, whenever you want. There are no NPCs constantly telling you where to go or any quests that force you to go to them in order to make the game progress. You are given true freedom when exploring Hollow Knight, which I think is one of its strongest aspects. The more you explore below Dirtmouth, the more residents come back up to Dirtmouth to help you out. Below Dirtmouth lies a large variety of areas to explore, each with their fair share of enemies to encounter, secrets to explore, and bosses to fight. In every area you go to, you will need to purchase a map in order to find your way around. Also, each area contains sections that you will need to come back to once you've acquired more abilities, which means you can just keep on exploring every area. One of the areas that really stick out to me is the City of Tears. I cannot explain how truly amazed I was when I first came to the City of Tears, as everything about this area is perfect, from the music to the beautifully designed environment. There is so much to do and explore in the City of Tears that make it really stick out compared to all the other areas in the game. This is not to say that the other areas are not great. They all have their own quirks that make them stand out on their own. For example, going to Crystal Peak reveals an area completely themed around mining the crystals found throughout all the tunnels in the area. When you first go to the area, it makes you feel like you are entering an entire mining operation, as everything in the area is based around mining, from the environment to the enemies themselves. Another great spot is Green Path, which is usually the second location you will explore when diving beneath Dirtmouth. This area is filled with all kinds of greenery, which is in high contrast to previous areas you would have explored at that point in the game. You are able to easily travel to and from different zones throughout the game by opening up any stag stations you find while exploring, which can make traveling long distances a breeze, so do not be afraid to travel too far from Dirtmouth, as wherever you go, you'll likely find a stag station waiting. I could go on and on about all the various areas throughout the game, but we'd be here all day, so if you are interested in all the different kinds of areas in the game, I'd recommend exploring the game yourself. One aspect of the game that is executed extremely well is the culture and language of all the characters in the game. The developers at Team Cherry somehow made up a brand new language that all the characters speak, and by some miracle they made it sound fantastic, almost as if it were a real language spoken on Earth. Here are a couple of examples of characters talking that you'd find on your journey.
Zupa ella merma.
Lien kla, Friden laya.
Warson Gian. Caseto Gueno.
There are many times I find myself lost in awe at just how beautiful this game is and its environments are, and I've never seen any other game match just how the environment makes you feel while exploring. On to the next major topic, bosses, and more bosses. There are so many bosses in this game that all have unique attack patterns and abilities, and makes combat against each boss never feel stale or repetitive. Some bosses have extremely simple attacks, such as Gorb and Zero, and others have much more complex attack kits, such as Broken Vessel or the Soul Master. There are a total of 47 bosses to be found throughout your journey, but my favorite boss would have to be Grim. No, not that Grim. This Grim, the Nightmare King. This boss fight always stuck out to me, as it always feels like a dance between two highly skilled opponents performing for a crowd, which gives you the feeling that you need to do your part in the dance in order to not let the crowd down. Every time you challenge the boss, you have to go down a long hallway in which you can hear a slight heartbeat getting louder and louder as you approach the arena, adding an element of extreme pressure as you fight the boss. This boss was extremely challenging and took me quite a few attempts before I was finally able to take down Grim once and for all. Another exceptionally designed fight in my opinion is the Mantis Lords. This fight makes you feel like a challenger against royalty, battling it out for honor as you face 3 high-ranking sisters. This fight is simple, but executed amazingly as you start out fighting one of the Mantis sisters, and then, when that one is defeated, you face the remaining 2 Mantis sisters, which end up doubling the speed of the previous fight. The final boss of the game is the Hollow Knight, which is a boss that is hyped up throughout the whole game as you progress through different areas, through different character interactions and readable text. This fight is quite intense, as you fight a vessel chosen by the King of Hollowness to protect the land from the infection, which is shown to grow throughout the game as you progress. As you go through the fight, you eventually can enter his mind and fight off Radiance, who is the reason the infection exists in the first place. Every time you conquer one of these challenging bosses, you are left with a feeling of satisfaction, and you wonder just what the next challenge could possibly be. This was the most fun part of the game for me personally, as I love to conquer challenges that get harder and harder as the game goes on, which brings me to my final point about the game, the post-game. The post-game is single-handedly the reason why it has taken so long for this video to come out, as I've spent a majority of my time in Hollow Knight trying to complete the post-game. The post-game consists of boss rush style challenges called Pantheons, in which you fight a large number of bosses in a row that each have a new boss not encountered in the game previously. These bosses are respectively Brothers Oro and Mato, Paintmaster Shio, and Great Nail Sage Sly. However, the boss at the end of the fourth Pantheon is the Pure Vessel, which is a much more difficult version of the Hollow Knight. The fifth Pantheon is the hardest one of them all, as it is a challenge in which you face almost every boss in the game in a row, including the previous Pantheon's final bosses, and the final boss of this Pantheon is Absolute Radiance, who is a much more difficult version of Radiance who consists of 3 phases. This Pantheon was extremely time consuming and difficult, as you have to grind through waves of bosses every time you wish to challenge the Pantheon, and about 30 minutes past every attempt I made that went all the way to Absolute Radiance. This was quite frustrating, as I could only fight Absolute Radiance about 2 times an hour if I was able to get through the rest of the bosses no problem. However, after many attempts and through sheer will alone, I finally beat Absolute Radiance. Well, that'll about wrap up my experience with Hollow Knight. There were a couple of things I did not mention that are extremely interesting, such as the lore of the Hollow Knight world, which is quite vast and will add to your immersion into the game if you learn about it. There are multiple endings to the game that, according to the developers, are all canon, so you may want to learn about them while waiting for Silksong to come out. If Silksong is able to accomplish what Hollow Knight was able to do, Team Cherry will cement themselves as one of the greatest indie developer teams of all time. If I have not convinced you to play this game by this point, then I do not know what will, and if you have played Hollow Knight already, then I hope this brought back some good memories of the game. Hollow Knight has solidified itself as a game that I will come back to play probably every couple of years or so, as I just get the itch every once in a while to come back and explore Hollowness in all of its glory.